All right, let's get into how cyber attacks occur. We already talked a little bit about ransomware, so I'm not going to really talk about this, but just a real quick note. The majority of ransomware infections that we see, target Windows-based networks, but we also, have heard that Linux-based and Unix-based systems are also target of attack. So just be on the lookout for that. One of the common attack vectors that we see, at least from DIR, is we'll look for systems that are inadvertently exposed to the internet via a remote desktop protocol. Now we know RDP is a legitimate utility used in a lot of networks. We actually use it as IT administrators, so this is a legitimate utility that allows people to remotely connect up to different systems, and depending on how your networks are configured, this is a legitimate tool. But if you have it inadvertently exposed on the internet, myself and a couple of other threat researchers at DIR will often look at different systems throughout the state of Texas based on some tools we have to see what they have exposed online. And we'll often notify different municipal entities and organizations that are Texas-based and let them know, like, hey, we can see this system, and if we can see it, so can the attackers. So just realize you're exposing yourself inadvertently if you're having this online, and you're susceptible to account lockouts and things like that. This is probably the most common way that we see external attackers try to compromise networks. They look for open RDP or remote desktop protocol, which is what your computer system, your IT systems may be doing inadvertently. Oftentimes, I've contacted entities and said, hey, this is the system we're seeing, and they'll say, hey, thank you, we didn't realize that was open, and they'll take measures to securely close that off. Did you guys have any additional? Okay. You may have default credentials on your systems, either hard-coded or somewhere on your networks. Attackers will often look for this within their software or software that they can get access to. So once they get that initial access, they're going to laterally move through your network and see if they can get access to certain systems. And we'll have a video in a little bit showing you of an attack that actually happened against a state entity. They're going to look for weak or default passwords. So if you don't change your passwords, you're basically opening yourself up to attack. I mean, one of the best things you can probably do within your systems is change all those passwords to something a little bit more complex, because your vendors will often make it easy for you to go in and use those default passwords. So any legacy hard-coded credentials, they may have default passwords listed in them. This right here is an example of, at least an image of an example of what happened. And this is particularly relevant, as I told you, with the situation going on with Iran and Israel. Unitronic systems here in Texas were targeted with particular defacement. Doesn't matter if you're not on a particular side. If you have a particular Unitronics piece of equipment, this was targeted, and this is basically what it looked like. And we found this on a system here in North Texas, correct?
This was the Houston area.
Okay, Houston area. So again, pay attention to what you have on your networks. Upgrade them often. Try to talk with your vendors, whoever you're using. Make sure you're getting the latest updates. And make sure they're not inadvertently connected to the internet, because they will be a target. Okay. So this here, let me go back real quick. Do we want to introduce the video a little bit? This is an attack against a water system here.
So, and this is a publicly disclosed attack through media articles, but we usually don't, go into who this belongs to. So this was a very public compromise of the control systems for two organizations in Texas. They found out about it when the water tanks were overflowing. Their sheriff's officer, the police officer said, something's weird going on. The elevated tanks are overflowing. And I think it goes to show you that we're all vulnerable, and we all need to take steps to mitigate this risk. So this is the video put up by the Cyber Army of Russia. They're the individuals who exploited this, and they're a threat actor group, constantly looking and constantly working across the U.S. to exploit systems. So the video's about 5 minutes, and the people in this room probably can tell us what they're adjusting in the set points better than we can. Richard can kind of guide us through, how we found it, and other ones that we've seen, including in other water systems, oil and gas, and other industries.
Yeah, there was some sound that came along with this, but they had some music that went along with this to narrate. But they're basically playing around with different settings within the system. I don't even know if they're doing anything correctly, but I think they're just demonstrating what they can do to a system that they found online and recorded it.
I would say one thing I've experienced in my years working in cybersecurity at the state, that while this might not have been hugely impactful for the organization, it still shows that they were able to gain access. And so a lot of times the threat actor, any kind of access, they will go out and post on the dark web or somewhere else, like, look, we hacked Texas, or we did these things. So you might, and a lot of times when we work with these entities, they feel like, well, why am I a target? I'm not a big water system, or I don't have a big budget. Richard was talking about ransomware payments. If they can get into your system, because anything that's exposed to the internet technically is accessible, then they will, and they're not shy about posting up and even overinflating the impact of what they did. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, you make a great point. You often hear organizations that are hit with security incidents say, well, I'm just a small little West Texas county or West Texas town. That's not how you're looked at on the internet. You're an IP address with a vulnerability that can be exploited. Yep. And the threat actors are going to do it. And then the threat actors are going to record it and use it as part of their message. So you can see this is 2 individual water systems that the threat actor knitted together. This happened around, I think it was early morning hours, Central Texas time, and this was a big wake-up call. Once this hit the threat intel space, that small Texas organization heard from several different federal organizations that they probably never expected to hear from. Nothing like having Homeland, 3-letter, 4-letter agencies. Nothing quite like having Homeland Security investigations show up at your door at 7 a.m. in the morning to kind of kick it off. And I think that's one of the things that incident response planning allows you to prepare for. Right. Prepare for if we do need to make notifications to TCEQ, DIR, EPA, FBI. You have those contacts prepared because. We've always said it's not a probability of if, but when you have some sort of security incident. So like I said, I'm sure the operators in this room could give us a better overview on what exactly these set points adjustments are making. But I kind of noticed something is that they're experimenting and they're making changes to see if they work and seeing the impacts on through the HMI through the screens. And we continue to see these attacks, and they're getting better and better, which is concerning.
What Jeremy mentioned too was that this was posted, I believe this was posted on Twitter, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
So, regardless of whether or not this was actually impacting operations, this was a propaganda type tool that this organization was using to say, hey, look what we can do. Even though they may not be impacting, the operations, they do have access to this, and they are randomly changing numbers and things like that. So they are actually displaying what their capability is. So fortunately, like Jonathan was mentioning, we were able to get them, or actually they were able to get their operations back up and operational, but try to imagine this happening to you and your organizations. What steps you'd be taking, to prevent this type of stuff.
Yeah, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder because I think we're going to hit this later, but as was mentioned, with this case and others, a lot of times there's vendors or contracts to provide support and nobody's talked to them about remote access, what kind of security they have. That's even if the contract's already in flight, it's much easier to have that conversation prior to something like this occurring. If you're going out through re-procurement, again, that's something to address on the front end. How are you going to, I get that, maybe they're not going to be on site accessing those systems, but talking about the method. Obviously, we don't want to see remote desktop protocol. We talked about MFA. There's such things as VPNs. There's different ways to access things securely remotely that can prevent somebody from Russia getting in your system. So that's one thing. The other thing, again, I'm not a water system operator, but some of those settings, I don't know if they need to go from 0 all the way up to 55, but they were just toggling to see what they could do. So that's probably more a setting on the system that's like, hey, maybe there's a default setting or default password that we need to make sure is actually works for operation. So anyway, thank you, Richard.
We're going to talk a little bit about insider threat. This situation in particular, we saw recently at local university?
Institution of Higher Education.
So, individual was going through a presentation for some students. They were prompted going through the presentation. They were trying to display a particular graphic, and they were presented with this particular type of interface here. This is normally what you might be familiar with is called a CAPTCHA to verify that you're actually a living, breathing human being. As I stated earlier, you want to pay attention to what you're clicking on. This particular individual did not, and was trying to, was more focused on delivering the presentation and wanted to get out the information he was trying to get out. But attackers are now exploiting these different types of prompts to get you to click on different things. So in this particular instance, instead of verifying you as a human, it's actually installing a particular type of malware. And pay attention to things that are odd or out of the ordinary. Normally people are familiar with the picture graphics that you may see, identify the cars or bridges or crosswalks or so on and so forth. In this particular one, it was asking them to do particular activity, and that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier about paying attention to things that are out of the ordinary. In this particular case, it was prompting the individual to run some commands to run a script. Now, education awareness is important, right? So again, teach your users that anything out of the ordinary you want to report to somebody. I don't care if it's your IT security staff or your administrator, but I would not go through and if you're prompted to do things, you're probably getting infected with some type of malware or something along those lines. In this particular case, it was a PowerShell script that was able to install some malware on a system. And again, professor not realizing what he was doing, he was more focused on delivering his particular lesson to those students, and actually infected his system. And we had to go through a whole incident with that particular institution and help them get figured out. So it's very easy to get tricked into doing things. So is this me continuing?
This is over to Dennis. Just any questions?
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments, or things they want to share before I turn it over to Dennis? Yes, sir.
So for all the people here, like some of us have a whole lot, but who would they go to find out if they've got everything going for them? Do you guys come in and help out, or do you recommend somebody?
Yeah, so the question is who to go to in the event that you may not have somebody on staff. And yeah, you can reach out to DIR. We may not cover you as a particular public or private sector entity, but we can definitely give you recommendations on what you can do in the event that you might have something going on. And there's other entities at the federal level, correct, that organizations can reach out to We're going to have some lists of resources that you can reach out to in case, us at the state level, we may not be able to help you, but we can guide you where to look for and who to contact. We always recommend, too, that if you do have an incident, if it's severe enough, always contact law enforcement to create that initial, incident report in case it may escalate to that level. Anything else you guys want to add? Okay. I'm going to hand it over to Dennis.
Thanks, Richard.
Yes, sir.
All right, so appreciate you, Richard. All right, so we're going to go over a couple of practical cybersecurity measures. So what best practices can help reduce the likelihood or impact of a cyber attack? So we got it broken down into 5 categories here. We want to encourage collaboration between the IT and OT operators, discuss cybersecurity with external partners, harden enterprise networks and systems, secure your industrial control systems, and participate in planning and exercise activities like what we're doing here today. All right, so encourage collaboration between IT and OT operators. First of all, we need to understand the differences between IT and OT. Does anybody want to take a shot at the difference between IT and OT?
IT is typically your admin network, public pay system, stuff like that, and your OT is your SCADA network.
Beautiful.
And you want to keep those separate.
Absolutely, beautiful. All right. In IT and OT systems, they may have different goals, objectives, and priorities, like the gentleman just stated there. But at the same time, we do want to make sure that we collaborate effectively and define what the common goal is. All right. So whether we're in the IT side of the house or the OT side of the house, we're going to have a common goal. And what do you think that common goal would be? Help me out. Security, right? Safety and security. That's always going to be a common goal that we can always find, common ground and, meet in the middle and make sure things are safe and secure. All right. How do we do that? We cross-train on IT and OT systems. Okay. It might not be always practical, but we can, find creative ways to make sure that the IT side of the house and OT side of the house are on the same page. You can do site visits. You can do cybersecurity awareness training, things like that, to ensure that there's some type of a merger of understanding of what the IT side of the house is doing versus the OT side of the house. Okay, and then we do that by developing roadmaps and outlines on what security controls we want to put in place to ensure that at that merging point or that convergence point, things are securely taking place. And then establish a shared understanding. Highlight the purpose and needs of systems and their components. Why do we have this piece of equipment? Why is this software on our network? What's its purpose? Why do we need it? All right. And then we always want to drive discussions to reduce the risk. Communication is key. When I was in the Army, I was a signal soldier, which is communications. And that's the key, right? If you can't talk, you can't fight, right? And I'm using that as an analogy, obviously. But we want to make sure that we're able to drive discussions and not be so siloed. Okay. All right, so discuss cybersecurity with external partners, your vendors. Define service level agreements for security incidents. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone deals with vendors. Are there things in your contract in place to address security incidents with your vendors? Show of hands. Is that something that we take into account while we're doing these service agreements with vendors? If something happens, who's responsible for this piece of equipment? If there's an outage or the vendor gets compromised, are they required to report it to you to let you know? Things like that. Richard touched on this a little bit earlier. We want to verify that your vendors are securely accessing your infrastructure. All right, if there's a remote into your system, make sure that it's secure. We want to implement multi-factor authentication. Something that you are, something that you know, or something that you have, right? Okay. Here's another, I think we talked about like pins and stuff like that, but we also have things like, keys, these UB keys here. All right. So however they're going to access your system, make sure that it's done securely. All right. And you want to build accountability into those situations where someone's accountable for the security of a particular system.
One thing I was going to say, and it was kind of getting to the gentleman's question about, hey, I don't have a team. I talked about there's a lot of free resources and teams out there to help you. By show of hands, is anyone a member of the Texas ISAL Information Sharing and Analysis Organization? There we go. We got a couple back there. It's free. It's something that DIR hosts. It's a free way to share threat intelligence. We share like again, with that video that we had, we're not going to say who it was, but we kind of share what people need to know to protect themselves. So again, later on in the slide deck, you guys are going to get access to this. It has of all our links and websites. Also the ISACs, the Information Sharing Analysis Center, they put out some free federal threat intelligence. They also have other services as well. So I just wanted to kind of mention those two things. We'll circle back to it, but those are some resources that you can take advantage of to help protect yourself. So.
Absolutely. And if that's a question that you have within your shop, hey, go back to your shop and ask, hey, who do we contact if something happens? That might be a question that a lot of people have. All right, and that kind of drives talk about that discussion that I mentioned there earlier. And Jeremy mentioned like the water ISAC, the Texas ISAL. There's monthly meetings where we share information on cyber threats that we're seeing throughout the state. There's tabletop exercises that we present to kind of help organizations deal with their cyber needs. All right. You want to harden your enterprise networks and systems. One way to do that is to get a cybersecurity assessment. And what assessment basically does, it just kind of gives you an idea of where you are now, and how you can improve and increase your maturity level over a period of time. And there's 5 major areas that your assessment should cover. This comes from the NIST cybersecurity framework. The first thing is to identify. All right, you want to identify what's on your network, protect what's on your network, detect, respond to any incidents, and then be able to recover. So your assessment should cover those 5 functional areas. All right. And then we want to focus on maturity. With every false alarm, false positive, or actual incident, we want to be able to learn from those things and get better with each iteration. Nothing should ever be wasted. All right. The EPA does have a water cybersecurity assessment tool. Has anyone used that in this room or even heard of that? You've heard of it? You use it? How was it?
I've gone to their trainings and worked through it with them.
Okay. Okay. You said you've heard of it, sir? You never?
Yeah, I've looked at, when I get back, I'll plan on using it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so like Jeremy mentioned before, there's a lot of free resources or low-cost resources out there that you should take advantage of.
Dennis, can I speak to that
Yes,
real
sir.
quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a nice, easy resource. It's an Excel document that you download, and it's a self-assessment, so it's only as good as the information that you put into it. But I think, like anything, it gives you a roadmap and helps you identify risks. And especially if we're messaging that up to our leadership, to your bosses or to your operations or to IT, or if you're a shop of one, it helps set some priorities.
Yeah.
So good tool.
And you can use that as ammunition to take to leadership and say, hey, we need more money. See this assessment? It's good to have evidence, right? All right. And then also we have the managed security services through DIR. There's third-party assessments that you can order at a fairly low cost. And if you want more information about that, please go to DIR Shared Services at dirtexas.gov. All right, backups. How many of y'all know about backups? Is that important? Mm-hmm. I'm not very familiar with water systems and whatnot, but I'm sure. Is there like backups for like the valve settings and pump settings, or is that all manual? Is there
That'll be a PLC backup.
a PLC backup?
Yeah, PLC backup, or if you have your HMI, depending on what it is, if you back up your HMI and it's controlled by the HMI, all of that will be inside that backup.
Okay, good. So backups are important. And where are your backups? There's a lot of situations where we'll call an organization after they've been hit by ransomware, and we ask them about their backups, and we get crickets, or they have backups, but they don't know how to access them. They haven't validated them in forever. I might be hitting some nerves in here somewhere. I hope not. But well, we want to make sure that our backups are validated, that they're tested, and that we can use them if we need them. Okay. Are they segmented? Are they a part of your a flat network, or do you have them separated in their own VLAN? What are you backing up? Is everything you're backing up necessary? Okay. Is there a way that you can check for anomalies in your backups? If you're doing a weekly backup, for example, and for 3 weeks straight, the backup had, let's just say, for example, 5 gigs of information. And then on the fourth one, it's 4 gigs. That's an anomaly. You got to be able to catch that kind of stuff to maybe see, maybe there's something going on with our backups. Okay. And then keep your backups offline if possible. All right. If they're offline, that's a better state to be in because, of course, if your network is compromised, typically the threat actor will go for your backups because typically the backups is what keeps them from getting paid. Okay, so you can get ransomware attacked and all your stuff is encrypted, but if you have backups, you can say, okay, boom, I can rebuild, I don't have to pay you. So a lot of times they go after the backups first to ensure that you can't do that because they want the money, right? Any questions on backups? No? All right. All right, so secure your infrastructure. You want to harden your network. What services are you running? Do you have remote monitoring and management tools? Is your RDP exposed to the internet? Like Richard said before, we have some tools that him and our other threat researcher can run, and these are free tools. They can scan networks and see what ports are open. Doesn't cost any money. All right. So all your things exposed to the internet. We had a case at a school district a couple years back where the school principal had to attend some conference virtually. So they opened up an RDP port for him and he was RDPing and then they forgot all about it. Then 8 months later, they come to work in the summer, everything's encrypted. All right. So you want to make sure that you keep track of what your network looks like and make sure that you're putting the proper security measures or security controls in place to help prevent that. We talked a little bit about virtual private networks, and MFA is a big deal. I think Microsoft put out something, I'm not sure if it was like advertisement, but they put out a stat that said that MFA prevents like 90% of ransomware attacks. So that extra layer of protection does a lot, okay, to help secure your network. One more key thing, if it's simple for you to get in, it's simple for the threat actors to get in. So if it's easy for you, it's probably going to be easy for them too. So think about that as well. We don't want to make things complicated, don't get me wrong, but we want to make sure that we have certain security controls in place. All right. And then understand what your third-party service providers are doing on your network. Make sure that they're following that contract and they're not doing anything outside of the scope of that contract. And then make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do inside the contract as well. Okay? And then add those security considerations and review those contracts often to ensure that you're getting what you need from those vendors. Any questions? No? All right, so secure industrial control systems. You want to define the operational technology network. You want to document where your OT systems are. All right, with a network map or systems map to know exactly what the location is. You want to understand the versioning, right? What version software are you running on some of these systems? Okay, and it comes into play because maybe a security, a known exploitable vulnerability called a KEV or a critical vulnerability may come out. And it may say that if you're running version 5.1 or prior, there's a 9.9 out of 10 critical vulnerability. Well, if you don't know what version you're running, now you have to scramble to figure that out. So you want to have that inventoried and have that documented so that when those alerts come out or those vulnerabilities are put out, you're able to kind of access your information quickly and know whether you're in danger or not. Okay. Like I said before, you want to reduce your third-party risks, minimize the time and scope of an outside entity's access. Like I said, you want to make sure those parameters are set on who can be inside your network and what they're supposed to do. You want to make sure that there's ways for you to identify any type of, out of place activity. If you have a contractor that works on your system, typically between 12 in the afternoon to 5 in the evening, and then you notice a login at midnight, that might be an issue, right? So you want to make sure that you're able to reduce that risk from the third parties. Anything to add there, Jonathan?
I was just going to say, the OT network map is always a challenge. I know a lot of organizations that we work with have a difficult time documenting their IT network. OT is a completely different animal because you may have interconnections between different plant sites, and it makes it more difficult to document both the physical and the logical functions of the OT network. But spending the time to make sure that it's well documented so you do have an understanding of your network flow. If you do have an incident, you can work through the preparedness and response functions, but also just so you have accountability for your systems. It can be a challenge. You saw the Unitronics PLC that was compromised, the one with the Iranian threat actor group. The 4 organizations that we saw in Texas, that was a cell card connected. So it wasn't connected to the main OT network or to the IT network. But there was that was not the initial point of compromise. But there was some compromise connections to the OT through local area connections. So having a good documentation and understanding what's on your network is a valuable investment in time. So if that's something you have, I think it's something that can be value added for any OT operation system. A lot of times those systems are built, 10, 15 years ago and still operated, day to day. So it's good to take a look and refresh that every once in a while.
All right, and then last but not least, we're going to talk about participating in planning and exercise activities, similar to what we're doing here today. For your incident response planning, DIR has an incident response red book. Great resource. It's a great resource. It pretty much outlines everything that you would pretty much need in order to have a pretty comprehensive incident response plan. There's templates included into this red book where all you have to do is just plug and play and just put the entities' names in there and phone numbers and contacts. So if you haven't seen it yet, I really, really encourage you to check it out. Jonathan spent a lot of time helping put that together, so I'm sure he would appreciate you taking advantage of some of his hard work there. All right, and then talk to other organizations on their planning best practices. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone call or have lunch with some of your adjacent organizations and see what are you doing for this or what are you doing for that, and talk about it. All right, and remember, start small and build over time. It may seem like an overwhelming task, but get something down on paper, and then as you get more and more confident and more information, you're able to build out a pretty comprehensive plan. The goals of an incident response plan: you want to outline the activities taken during each phase of an incident response situation. So like I mentioned before, you have those 5 functional areas, the first one being identify. Okay, so what are some of the functions that we might do during the identify phase of incident response? Anybody want to help answer that question? Identify. Common sense. Anybody?
What? Where?
Yeah. You want to identify all your assets and all your equipment, right? Yeah. Do that inventory. All right. Identify what you have on your network, because if you don't know if you have it, you can't protect it. Okay. And for example, with detect, you want to be able to ensure that you can detect any type of strange activity that's going on your network. What tools do you have in place? What systems do you have in place to be able to know when something's out of place? You want to define roles and responsibilities. Very, very, very important. If you're going to include your HR department into your incident response plan, they need to know. Okay? If your finance officer is going to be a part of your incident response plan, they need to know. If your maintenance facility, the guy who opens up the gate in the morning, or make sure that these places are locked and whatever he has going on, if they're going to be a part of the incident response plan, they need to know their role and their responsibility. Because the last thing anybody wants is to get a call at 2 a.m. saying, hey, you're on the hook for this, and they didn't know. All right, so you want to socialize this plan to ensure everyone understands their role and responsibility.
And Dennis, I would just add that from an operator perspective, you need to know if you're part of IT's incident response plan. Because you're an IT customer, you may be an OT customer. And I think it's a really good opportunity for our operators and our plant managers to understand what role they have in incident response. Even if it's only in the IT network and doesn't even come close to water operations or wastewater operations, it's still good to have a seat at the briefing table and understand the timelines. Absolutely. So it goes both ways.
Absolutely. You want to pre-plan your supporting response resources, meaning if you're going to need or possibly need outside resources during the event of a incident, regardless, whether it be a low or critical, get on the phone, get that phone number, make contact with those outside resources prior. Okay, build the relationships now if you can, so that way when you pick up the phone and call, they already know you, they understand what you guys are dealing with, and they can better assist you. Socialize leadership notification process. When do we need to contact leadership? There should be a threshold in there to let you know, well, things like this, maybe we don't have to contact leadership about. But if it reaches this certain threshold where it affects our operations in this manner, we need to contact leadership. So you need to socialize that and make sure everyone understands when they need to notify leadership. And then you want to document those reporting requirements. This is Texas, right? We got a lot of people that's been working in certain positions for a long time. And a lot of times you'll hear, well, I've been here for 35 years. I don't need no plan, or I got it all right here. Okay, buddy. Okay, buddy. You might have a wedding to go to, or you might be in Mexico somewhere hanging out, or hunting boars, or playing golf, or whatever you got going on, right? That particular day, right? So make sure that you document these things so that everyone knows, all right? I don't know if it's a job security type thing where people want to hold all this information, right? And be that one single point of failure, but it's not a good thing to be a single point of failure. I promise you it's not.
I have a good single point of failure story.
Go ahead.
So I was helping a county with a security incident, and this was probably the first part of COVID. So when you traveled this IT director had traveled to a foreign country, and we had to get them to approve what we call a demand for incident response, so that their county could get resources to help them. So we had to set up a phone call and text message back and forth to Mexico, and I was like, man, we should have had a secondary person designated, or I wish we had this plan written down, because it's a long way to support someone in a security incident. And then what was interesting is, at that time there was quarantine requirements coming home, and it drew out their participation even longer. So like I said, whether it be the OT response plan or the IT response plan or a unified plan from both, there's really value in it. And something you said is know who's going to support you. As you know, OT operations are different than IT operations for your incident response vendors. There's fewer OT cybersecurity incident response vendors than IT security incident response vendors. And additionally, if you have manual workarounds, your resource needs for manual operations go way up, or have the potential to go way up. So think about those things with manual operations as well. And we'll get into that a little bit in the exercise. Absolutely. That's things that can be added into that response planning process. So just wanted to add that in there.
Absolutely. And one key, like I said earlier, start small and don't reinvent the wheel. There's resources out there. Google is pretty powerful still. A lot of good resources out there. And like I said, that incident response team red book is a great resource to start as far as building your incident response plan. You're not alone in this thing. Like Michael Jackson said, you're not alone. You're not alone. You have help. Okay? So go ahead and use those resources to get you guys taken care of. All right. So we talked about resources earlier. So here's some of the resources that are out there. We talked about the red book. I'll take a moment here. I know someone said no cameras, but if you want to take a snapshot of this, you might have it in your packet already. I'm not sure. It's in the packet? Okay. But I'll leave that up there. We'll talk about some of these things. DIR, our red book, our CISO services guide has a lot of services that are available for you to choose from. MSISEC put out a Stop Ransomware guide. It's been out for a few years now, but the information in there is very relevant. It's just practical things that you can do to help stop the spread of ransomware or ransomware attacks, and what to do should you find yourself in that situation. That's still a really good resource there. CISA offers training for cybersecurity. Don't be afraid to access that. And then we talked about some of the memberships that you can join, like the Texas ISAC, MSISAC, and then InfraGard. All right.
Hey, Dennis,
Yep.
They all have the flyer for the TEACS course that you helped work on.
Okay.
So we have one for law enforcement, so it's a kind of introduction to law enforcement and cybersecurity. This one's for public water systems. So this is available on TEACS. It provides 4 hours of operator credit. It's self-paced, and I think it's a really great resource that DIR, TCEQ, and Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service have collaborated on. So I left a flyer with, there should have been a flyer at the front. So take it back. I think it's a good opportunity to give it to your IT staff so they get a little bit of understanding what it's like in the OT side and in the water side, but also something that's great for your class, for your younger operators as they work up through their licensing. So just wanted to share that.
Confused, my fault.
Awesome, no worries. It's a good resource. Hope you take advantage of it.
Here's some additional resources here and contact information that you'll have in your packet. We talked about earlier, if you get a phishing email and you're not sure about it, you can email it there to DIR Cyber Operations, in the INSOC there, security alerts at dir.texas.gov. If you get a weird email, you think it's phishing, you want to get it checked out, you can email it to that email address there. They'll check it out and let you know if it's good to go or not. And then they'll also send you any indicators of compromise, things that you need to look out for that you can kind of implement into your operations. Now, I do also want to highlight our DIR Cyber Incident Response Support, that 24/7 number there, 877 DIR CISO, 24/7. That number is manned. If you have an issue with cybersecurity, feel free to give us a call, and we'll try to get you pointed in the right direction.